What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Hangover. I'm Daniel, alongside with me, as always, Shannon White. Shannon, how was your Easter, man? Happy Easter. How was your weekend?
Well, happy Easter to you, and hopefully you and yours had a great one. We did. We just had the family over and just had a great time and celebrating Easter and our Savior. So yeah, we had a great time, and um, I was expecting maybe to have some big news today, but as me and you was talking before the show, everything's April Fool's junk. So you don't believe anything on April 1st.
Yeah, no, not at all. When I was looking, like I was telling you before the show, I was looking up some stuff for some content and just kind of see if anything popped. And sure enough, I started seeing things about Ben Roethlisberger unretiring and
Yeah.
all sorts of stuff. That I was like, I got to be careful for
Oh
what
yeah.
I'm reading today. Hope you guys haven't gotten caught up in it. But with that being said, there hasn't really been a whole lot of news here recently. It appears that the Steelers, though, have, if it's real, I'm kind of questioning it, but apparently the Steelers made an offer or has kept their offer to Tyler Boyd, the one that they originally gave him, apparently, that he turned down. What are your thoughts on the possibility of him being another option for the Steelers? You don't feel that quarterback, that wide receiver room is getting a little crowded, especially if they're going to target one in the top end of the draft?
Yeah, I think that they were really interested in Tyler Boyd because all along, the rumor was hometown kid wanted to come home. So I think the stores thought they could get him at a little bit of a discount. And then it turns out that the first report I heard was 8.5 million a year. And based on what I've seen, especially last season, it looks like he's lost the step. I
Mm-hmm.
think he was still very crafty, would be a very good slot and third receiver, but they're not going to overpay. That if you've watched Khan this offseason, he has been controlled aggression. He's showing patience, and he's like, "This is what we're offering, and that's it."
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what the offer might be. I'm thinking it's probably closer to five.
Yeah.
Just guessing. And so they are going to focus on somebody, I think, in their first three rounds because it's such a deep class. So I think it's better to just wait and do like Khan's doing and let the market come to him. He did it with Fields and it worked out perfectly. He set the market with Queen. I mean, he's had such a strong offseason. There's no reason to change that strategy now. And I've
Yeah.
said before that there's a lot of guys, people's like, oh, they need to sign this guy. They need to sign that guy. A lot of these guys are still going to be there after the draft. Teams, fill out, see how the draft falls to them, and then they'll look at filling in these secondary positions.
Yeah, I hear you on that. But what does this say? What does it say about the receivers that they have? If the Steelers were to acquire Tyler Boyd, I don't think that that's going to take wide receiver out of the first two rounds.
Mm-mm.
And you already have George Pickens. You've picked up Jefferson and what was it, Wentz or Quince?
Quince
Uh,
Watkins. Yep.
there you go, Watkins, and you have Calvin Austin. I'm assuming Watkins is going to be somebody that you're hoping to get some kickoff return or punt return work, but they also have Cordell Patterson. So where does Calvin Austin fall if the Steelers end up acquiring a Tyler Boyd and pick up another receiver in the draft?
Well, he's going to, some of these guys ain't going to make the team because the Steelers, it wouldn't shock me if they only go five deep and then try to stash a guy or two on the practice squad because we know there's going to be more 12 personnel.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see an extra tight end before I can see six wide receivers.
Yeah.
And so I believe that some of these guys are really going to struggle. And so everybody's got to come to camp ready to roll. Calvin Austin's going to have to show that he's more than a gadget guy and just got to send on go routes. I mean, he's going to have to really show the willingness and eagerness, even if he's not, this is not his specialty, to throw his body around to try to be a decent blocker.
Mm-hmm.
And because, as we said, they're not really desperate to sign Boyd because you got Jefferson, and I believe Jefferson is a veteran, experienced guy that you can use a wide receiver three. So I think they'll really focus in the draft to get that wide receiver too, hopefully. And so Boyd is going to either come to agreement with Khan on that money, or they'll let him go elsewhere.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, like you mentioned, Calvin Austin's really going to have to step it up this offseason and prove it himself for this team. And I think he might be one of those guys that might be on thin ice. You know, his size and frame really, he doesn't really fit, in my opinion, what Arthur Smith's offense is going to try to do, you know, as far as the blocking and the expectation of blocking from the wide receiver position. So I think he's going to be on thin ice. He may even be a, possible trade, person, when come draft time, some capital there. But yeah, I think he's on thin ice. But like you said, if the Steelers only bring in 5 wide receivers, it's gonna be tough camp to watch, or it's gonna be tough camp for these guys, and good for us to watch. I'm excited to see where they go in that position. But transitioning to the center position, because that's the other much needed or most talked about position that is out there. Free agency, there's not much there anymore. It kind of seems like they're kind of putting all their eggs in that draft bucket. And if that's the case, do you think we're going to see a center in the first round?
Just based on the, I don't like it, but the truth is that 5th year is so vital to any first round rookie contract, that 5th year option. So I believe that they will try to work it to where they can get maybe you say offensive tackle that they really covet with that first round pick, even a wide receiver. I don't like that because this draft goes 3 rounds deep with quality receivers. I think there's where you don't need to reach. Whereas an offensive tackle, if a guy's, one of them top guys fall to 20, you need to pull the trigger. Or even if you trade up just a little bit. Center, you'd want to trade back if you're going to do a first round for a center. But their yearly cost on a 5th year, just like with running back, it's very low. So teams avoid drafting them in the first round. On the free agent market, the guys that are left out there, you've got like Allen from the Rams. He's still a guy that's got starting experience. Mason Cole's still sitting out there. You can bring him back to be a bridge guy if you don't think that the center you do pick up. Let's say you wait on one of the second-tier guys in the 3rd round and you bring in a guy to be a bridge center. But you also got Nate Herbig, if we've talked about, and Spencer Anderson, who a lot of people are saying could, step in there and compete at center this training camp. So I just think that's how the Steelers look at it, and they're not panicking. I'm panicking. A lot of fans are panicking because, it's all right. Now, the crazy rumor, what ain't a rumor? Khan said it. He said this week that they think Dan Moore could be a good center. I don't want to see that. I mean, I don't know. I've not heard about him working at center at camp at all. This is the first I heard about it. But he mentioned Herbig, and then he didn't mention Spencer Anderson. He mentioned Dan Moore Jr. So I know they love Dan Moore, and if they can get him in there somewhere, they're going to try to stick him in there. But I don't want to see him at center. Let's get one of these young guys and take care of center for the next 10 years. Yeah, I can't hear you. Mute.
Thank you. I said, if Dan Moore ends up being the center, is he going to hike the ball into the chest of Russell Wilson when he's under center? I mean, you need like 6'6", 6'5". That's a pretty big center for a 5'10" quarterback.
No, which center was you talking about?
Dan Moore. I said, if Dan Moore ends up being the center.
Isn't he about 6'4"?
I thought he was about 6'5", 6'6", but maybe 6'4".
But well, I mean, for Russell, he's always had to find throwing lanes.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you ever watch him, he moves, he slides a little bit.
Yeah.
and then he finds that lane and he throws through it.
Yeah.
Because, he'll hit guys in the back of the helmet if he ain't careful.
Yeah. 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 Dan Moore's 6'5", so
Okay.
he's up there.
Yeah.
If Russell goes under center, he's going to be hiking the ball at his chest. That's what I'm saying.
He'll be handing it to him up here.
Exactly. Yeah, that'd be crazy. I never thought of Dan Moore as the possible center. I've never seen him snapping. I've never heard of him snapping.
I haven't either. Yeah.
That's a huge component of the center position. Has he ever called the offensive line calls or any of those type of things? I mean, there's a lot to the center position other than just being able to block or physically able to move.
I think that what it is one, Khan is wanting to try to give the impression everything's fine. He's calm about it. There's no need to panic, even though the Steelers are heavily invested in center prospects. Mm-hmm. They've looked at guys that might even be available in the 4th and 5th round. Mm-hmm. They could easily draft 2 because they have really been doing their due diligence, looking at all these center prospects. And some of the guys in the 1st round, like Barton and Fianu, and these guys can also play center. And I want a true, honest-to-God center. Yeah. I want a guy, as you say, can call out the protections, that can communicate, has leadership, has experience, because experience matters for a center. So if you look at Jackson Powers Johnson, he was the best center in college football last year at Oregon, but he's only had one standout season. You take a guy like Cedric Van Pran, Zach Frazier, these guys have 3 and 4 years experience as a top center in college football. I want that experience. I think then you have a smoother transition. Mm-hmm. And one thing that people got to understand too is that last year Frazier had what was considered one bad snap, for the whole season, and never had more than one in any of his seasons. So that's been a real issue for the Steelers for a while now. Pouncey's last couple of years, he struggled snapping. I don't know what happened, but I think when guys start to lose their anchor, and they got power over them, they know they got to get that snap back and then get up to jam that guy who's a lot bigger than them, and I think it affects their form and function on the snap, because that's what happened to Pouncey there at the end. But yeah, I just want to see the Steelers settle this center position this draft once and for all.
I agree. And, any thought that maybe perhaps they're just kind of throwing that center thing out for Dan Moore as a, kind of telling the other teams he's a versatile and this could be somebody you could have on your team. You get what I'm saying?
Trade value, baby. Trade value all day.
Exactly. Maybe that's the case, because I don't see him ever being a center, especially for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't think I would hope the Steelers never get that desperate enough to put him in there.
Yeah, exactly.
But again, so you're thinking that maybe perhaps center is going to be the second position taken in the second round. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would like to see the value to move up a little bit in the second, because they're at 51 and they have 2 third-rounders. Mm-hmm. I'd rather quality over quantity. That'd be great to keep all these picks.
Yeah.
But if you need to move up in the second to assure you get one of the top, because there's talk now that Jackson Powers Johnson might fall minimum in the first round. Mm-hmm. And he could fall early second. So if you need to move up, I would say try to trade a third rounder to move up and make sure you get that guy.
Yeah, it makes sense. Going to the first round, you mentioned right tackle or tackle. There's kind of 2 right tackles that I think the Steelers have shown quite a bit of interest in. One Mims and the other one Fuaga.
Fuaga. Yeah.
But I think Fuaga is going to have to be a guy that the Steelers have to move up for.
They would, yeah.
How far do you think the Steelers have to move up for that guy? And is he that much better than, let's just say, Mims, who might be there at around 20 if they stay put?
To me, my favorite offensive lineman in this whole draft is Fuaga.
Mhm.
To me, he looks like a plug and play, dominant right tackle. He mauls guys. He's just like a bear.
Mhm.
Watching what he does, Daniel. I don't know if you remember Anthony Munoz real well.
Yeah, a little bit.
But that's who he reminds me of. Once he gets his hands on these guys, he just takes them wherever he wants them. And this is, Power 5 conference school.
Mhm.
So I believe he could come in, and I think he could really be that dominant right tackle. I think he would revolutionize Arthur Smith's running game with him and Daniels on that side, that right side. Now, I think you'd have to move up maybe 14.
Hmm.
He might go before then, but it looks like there's going to be a run on quarterbacks and wide receivers. And, the top defensive player, edge guy, and corner
Mhm.
always seem to go right in the middle of that, even if it's a offensive heavy first round. So
Yeah.
he might, Alt will probably be the first tackle off the board. Then it's probably Fuaga. So I think that maybe 14.
Mhm.
I hate to give up draft capital, but I think if it's a generational guy, and I think he has the ability to be a generational guy. So, yeah, if they could move up to 14 and get him, I would be okay.
Yeah, hopefully so. It seems like the Steelers are pretty interested in him. I think that they spoke high. I think he spoke highly. The Steelers are talking about the Steelers reference meeting them. That'd be great, man. That would definitely solidify the offensive line. And then if you go and pick up one of these centers, whether it be Zach Frazier in the second or that guy in the third from what's his
Van
name?
Braun.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, if they end up getting one of those guys in there, I think that this could definitely be an impressive offensive line. Najee Harris and Jalen Warren are going to have lanes for days to run through.
Well, I actually didn't answer your question all the way. I just realized comparing Fuaga to Mims.
Yeah.
Mims is an incredible, nimble athlete for the 6'8" and the reach for days. I mean, that guy's got some of the longest arms. Got a great punch. He's a little bit more raw.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, he's not. I think he's still a plug and play guy versus what the Steelers have in Dan Moore.
Mm-hmm.
You move Broderick Jones over and all. But I think I would rather stay at 20 and take Mims and keep your draft capital if it's going to cost too much to move up to get Fuaga.
Yeah, I agree. I think it probably costs definitely one of those thirds, if not more, to move up to 14 from 20.
Probably a pick next year as well.
Yeah, I would think so. And as aggressive, and I put that in quotations because I don't really think that Omar Khan has been too aggressive this offseason. He's got some big names, but I don't think the moves have been aggressive. He didn't give up a lot for Justin Fields. He gave up a 6 next year. He's not paying Russell Wilson very much. And in my opinion, Patrick Queen is a little bit underpaid, based on his performance for the last couple of years with Baltimore. So, I'm not sure if that's going to translate into the draft, if he's going to stay patient and he's going to stay there and let the draft fall to him. Last year, in his first draft, he moved up to the 14th spot to pick up Broderick Jones. Mm-hmm. You think the Steelers either stay put, move up, or move back? What is which one do you think is more plausible in this upcoming draft?
Man, the rumors are everywhere.
Yeah.
I've heard rumors of them moving up substantially for an individual target. And there's been a lot of talk from people like me. I haven't heard the rumors out of the organization about maybe moving up for a guy like Fuaga. I just think that they really are looking at the three main positions we've talked about, the tackle, center, and wide receiver, that if they come out with somebody that they were really targeting at those three positions, they would consider it a success. And watching, as you say, how Khan has been this offseason, when when he's ready to pull the trigger, he pulls it, but he's been very patient. So we're keep expecting another big move, but I think the big move will be during the draft.
Mm.
And he is not scared to trade future draft capital to get what he wants now. And why I like that is going into this offseason, the Steelers had some main needs. They filled a lot of those main needs. So they still got like 3 main ones we've talked about. 4 if you count cornerback. So I'd rather see them go and be aggressive this draft and fill them needs and trade some of future draft capital. Here's why. They should be picking much later next year if they play this right.
Mm.
Right now the Steelers are stuck in a purgatory of sorts. They always pick 17 to 22, 23. The reason why is they're consistently mediocre. They're over 500 and they sneak into the playoffs sometimes, but they're not a real threat. But they're stuck. If you pick in the first 10 picks, you have a great chance to get a generational guy. Where the Steelers are picking, the only way you get a generational guy is if somebody overlooks a TJ Watt, let's say, and he exceeds expectations. But you're probably getting, in that range, a quality starter, but not necessarily a difference maker. So that the Steelers are just stuck on this roulette wheel or merry-go-round. It just keeps going around and around, and they can't get off. But last year, Khan become more aggressive and more modern in his approach, and I think we're seeing it this year, and I think we'll see a trade in this draft, at least one. And I believe that it would not shock me to see him use future draft capital to identify problems right now or to solve problems right now.
Yeah, no, I definitely do see a trade at some point in the draft. How early that trade is, I don't know. I mean, if he moves back, I think I think that maybe perhaps the tackles were taken before they could get them, and they're moving back for a center to acquire more capital.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think I can see something like that happening. I think if they move up, it's because one of these tackles, fell, or they're starting to be a run on the tackles, and they want to go and pick up one. I can see that happen. I can also see him staying put, and it's just crazy because you just don't know. I mean, Omar Khan has done some things like last year, like we said, he moved up in the first round, and then he's got some guys. He set the mark in the middle linebacker position, but got a steal there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like there's going to be a move, like just like you said. We know there's going to be a major move. It'll be interesting to see when that comes. But we're going to take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. On the audio side, we have a few words from our sponsors. On the YouTube side, just stay put for a few seconds for us. And welcome back to the Hangover. I'm Daniel. Alongside with me is Shannon White. As always, today we're talking about Omar Khan and how he's been manipulating the market and kind of looking a little ahead into the draft and see maybe perhaps how aggressive he's going to be. But before we get back into the conversation, do you have anything coming out on SteelCurtainNetwork.com, or have you recently put out anything that you want to plug in?
No, last week's article done really well. Just discussing a lot of the way Khan is approaching this situation, and how that we know that testing is part of the equation in draft evaluations. But a guy's 40 time, now Worthy, the guy who broke the 40-yard dash record at the combine this year, the wide receiver out of Texas, he can run really fast in a straight line. But his tape does not match what a guy with that kind of speed, what an impact he should have had. So somebody's going to overdraft him. And I definitely don't want it to be Pittsburgh. And there was an article written, and I'm not going to say who wrote it, but they wrote about that Zach Frazier's arm length was a concern. at 32 and a half inches.
Mhm.
Well, the problem is that's exactly the same arm length as Jackson Powers Johnson, who they think is awesome. But what happens is we all have personal preference
Mhm.
and opinion, and you have to try to keep that out of your draft evaluations. And you take Cedric Van Braun, who's taller than both of them. He's over 6'4", but his arms are shorter, 31 and 7/8. But we're talking about an inch either
Right.
way. And a guy's success at the professional level is not going to come down to an inch here or 0.10 of a second there. It comes down to a lot of other factors. So, I was just wrote the article to explain to people to look at the whole everything, the big picture, not just a certain, graph here or a certain testing mark there. And so this week's article will be similar in other things that they need to look for because we're coming up on the draft really fast.
Mhm.
And that some, the testing is great, but nothing replaces the film.
Yeah, 100%. There's been a lot of players who've tested well and who are athletically gifted, and it
Mm-hmm.
just doesn't translate onto the field when it comes time to hit somebody. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
Well, look at Hill. I
Mhm.
mean, Tariq Hill is the fastest guy in the NFL.
Mhm.
He might be the fastest guy ever. The guy's speed just plays. But when he was coming out of Texas Tech, if I remember right, he was a running back.
Yeah.
So, I don't think he even ran at the combine. So you take a guy like that, and they got lucky. They hit on a guy who was a running back with breathtaking speed,
Yeah.
and then he become like the most dominant wide receiver as far as right now, speed guy in the NFL. So I just think that, and the Steelers really had an interview and spent time with Worthy at Texas's Pro Day. And I mean, I think they're covering all the bases, but I just do not want to see them reach for any wide receiver in such a deep class, especially one that is kind of a one-trick pony.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Make sure you guys go check that out at stillcurtainetwork.com. And while you're there, go check out all our other audio only podcasts. You can find them there. You can also find them anywhere you check out your podcast, whether it be Spotify or Apple Podcasts. If you do find it on Apple Podcasts, make sure you give a 5-star rating if you would. Also, if you go back to Friday's State of the Steelers on the Steel Curtain Network, you'll see my audio only podcast that aired out a couple of days ago. If you haven't heard it, make sure you go out and check it out. So, one position we didn't bring up in the first part of the show when it came to positions in need was a cornerback position. Now, the Steelers went out and traded Deontay Johnson. They got Dante Jackson. From what I understand, this was a guy that the Pittsburgh Steelers were highly interested in. They were interested in him when he was coming out of LSU. They were apparently interested in him when his contract was up. And again, also last year at the trade deadline. They ended up trading him this year. I think that the Steelers think they got their guy across from Joey Porter Jr. I still think they need a slot cornerback. But how convinced are you that Dante Jackson can be, CB2, and or are you think that maybe that guy is going to be somebody in the draft?
Well, the Steelers have had multiple recent seasons where their cornerback 2 would not have been the caliber of Dante Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
Jackson is a quality professional. He's not had his best season last year, but he's still a quality player, still has elite speed. And I would rather see him part of a rotation, working the slot some as well, because he doesn't have the height and the shutdown man that coverage that you have with Joey Porter Jr. I'd like to see a Darius Rush and a Corey Trice. One of these two or both of them step up and be part of that rotation before somebody finally takes over cornerback 2. But the Steelers appear to want bigger guys because Joey Porter Jr., Rush, Trice, they're all 6'4", 2 or bigger. And there's a few guys in this draft class that I think would be great fits. Even some guys like in the 3rd round that they could target, especially if they keep both 3rd rounders. Max Milton out of Rutgers is like 6'1", 200 pounds, real solid build. Looking at him athletically and his frame, he reminds me of Rod Woodson. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be Rod Woodson, but I mean, he's very physical, and he's a guy that can play, tight press man coverage. And I think if you could get him and pair him up with Joey Porter Jr., and then have Jackson and Rush and Trace, on the bench and coming in special packages, Steelers could really massively improve their secondary this offseason.
Yeah, no, they definitely could. I mean, with Sean Elliott, him coming in as the safety there, I think that solidifies a spot next to Minka. And with Dante Jackson, I think, like you mentioned, he's going to be a guy that is a higher caliber than what the Steelers have had at that cornerback 2 level for a while. And, putting Minka back to his normal position where he was able to go out there and, where he got the most splash in his previous seasons, man, I'm really excited about this defense. But like you said, I think that there's a opening there. For me, I think it's going to be in the slot position. The Steelers have been trying to replace Mike Hilton since they let him go. And, I don't know if there's a Mike Hilton in the draft somewhere, maybe the 3rd, 4th round, like you mentioned. But if there is, I'm sure that's probably where they'll get him. But if not, and we'll play a little bit of a game here. Let's talk about some players that might make a return here. And we'll start off with that slot position. How likely do you think that Shannon Sullivan is going to return for the Pittsburgh Steelers to be that slot cornerback position?
When they got him during the draft, last year, and I was like, oh no, because all I can remember was him getting regularly toasted in Minnesota. Now they had a bad defense. That's before Brian Flores went there last year and really helped solidify their defense. But I thought he was serviceable. But again, he's nowhere near. I actually thought that I can't think of his name. The guy went to the Ravens.
Arthur Mallett.
I thought Mallett was stronger the year before than Sullivan. But Mallett had a really good year for the Ravens. But neither one of them is Hilton. But Hilton is like, if he's not the best slot corner, he's in the running for the best slot corner. And I'm happy for him to finally get some stability, a professional NFL stability. That's what he wanted, and he found it in Cincinnati. That's what Terrell Edmonds wanted, and he's still looking for it because he's been playing on a lot of these 1-year deals. I'd still like to see him bring him back because I think if they can mend fences, he'd be great quality to have on the bench.
Yeah.
But Deshaun Elliott can play some slot. They're talking about maybe bringing back Patrick Peterson, and he's already said that if they do want to bring him back, that would be after the draft.
Right.
And if they still are interested, he can play some slot, but he's said that he's not a safety. I think he figured out at the end of last year and then in the playoffs where he got run over by the wide receiver from Buffalo. I think he figured out he's not a safety like we've been saying for a while. So, but Sullivan just does not impress me. I'd like to see an upgrade. Now, there's a couple of corners in this draft, say 4th round range. One kid out of Michigan, I butcher his name every time I try to say it. Sandstrel. But he's the model for a slot corner. And that's a guy that I think the Steelers have already talked to at Michigan's Pro Day and at the Combine. So he could very well be on the Steelers' radar in the 4th round.
Very well, very well. Yeah, I don't think that Sullivan ends up coming back. I thought he had a strong performance in the preseason last year. He had an impressive pick, but as often does, preseason doesn't often translate into the regular season. And so Yeah, I can do without seeing Sullivan again. You brought up Patrick Peterson. That was my next person that I was going to ask you as far as him having a possible return. I think he's probably more than likely to return than Shannon Sullivan, and I do think you are correct as far as it being post draft. If the Steelers end up not getting somebody, I think that's probably the more likely time that the Steelers might go back to a Patrick Peterson. But you're absolutely right. As far as him being a safety, that's not his position. In Buffalo, it was cold. Running backs were running at him, and he was not running right directly at him back.
No.
So it's a different position. It's a different position. You brought up Terrell Edmonds. You said that he could be somebody that's good on the bench. He's out there. I think that if nobody picks him up, obviously he'd probably be open to return if he doesn't have any other option. I definitely would like to see Terrell Edmonds back. I think he could be that guy that can be in rotation. Do you think he could beat out though DeMonte KZ? Because they're going to have that 3 safety look. I mean, that's at least what they want, right? And you think he'll find himself on the team there with who they have?
Well, right now, KZ plays. He's more of a deep center fielder, and so Deshaun Elliott is penciling in the strong safety, and then Fitzpatrick. But they'll want another guy because they're going to have Killebrew, but he, as we know, is really a special team specialist. So they will probably want one more safety because KZ can fill in for Minka Fitzpatrick. Whereas who's going to back up Deshaun Elliott? Now you could get probably Eric Rowe again. Because, during that final stretch of games, Eric Rowe played very, very well. And he's very intelligent, experienced, and he's a guy you can get cheap. Because they got to keep these defensive guys, the cost down because they're already overpaying on defense. But that's what I'm saying. If it's Edmonds and you can mend fences, or it's Rowe who already says he wants to come back to Pittsburgh, you could get both of them guys for a very reasonable contract.
I agree. I'm glad you brought up Rowe. That was a guy that I actually slipped my mind until you brought him up. And he did play fairly well last year towards the end of the season. And he is a guy that I thought was, hard hitter. He put his head there in the fan, and when he needed to go up and make a tackle, he was able to do so. Sticking to the defense, one last player, Bud Dupree. He's going to be a free agent. He's out there. He was kind of close to coming back to the Steelers last year or the year before.
Last year, yep.
And just ended up going to Atlanta. He's a free agent again. Any likelihood or any chance you think you see him back in Pittsburgh? And how would he fit in the rotation with a Herbig, Watt, and Highsmith?
Well, it could come down to him or Golden. I thought Golden was really an upgrade because for most of the year, Golden was edge 3. And Herbig eventually, I think, took it over. And I think this year Herbig will be edge 3 and get the majority of those backup snaps. But if you bring in Golden or you bring back Dupree, either way, you've got a high-quality veteran. Dupree can still get after the quarterback. I think Golden might be a little bit better pass rusher right now, but Dupree can still set a great edge. He's one of the heaviest and strongest edge guys in the NFL. And as we know, he sets an edge like nobody else. And you can easily use him to back up Alex Highsmith, who also sets a really good edge. So I would like to see that if Highsmith leaves the field, you're not losing anything setting the edge. Whereas last year, Herbig come in to spell Highsmith sometimes, and Herbig wasn't able to because he's lighter. Now we'll have to see what he looks like at camp this year. I expect Herbig to come in maybe 5 pounds heavier. I think he could easily put on 5 pounds of muscle this offseason to help him with that. And Herbig reminds me of Highsmith and TJ in that he's really focused. And if he knows he has a weakness, he's going to focus on that all offseason. So I think that was one of his main weaknesses, that he needed to get a little stronger, a little heavier to help set the edge. So But if they can bring back Golden or Bud Dupree, I think the edge is still their strongest position.
Oh, for sure, definitely. I like Golden. I think at this point I would probably prefer Golden over Bud Dupree. I think that I liked what he was able to do last season. I think he was very productive when he was on the field.
Mm-hmm.
He did what you were expected of him to do, and so I wouldn't mind seeing Golden back and having that four, outside linebackers on the defense. I do think that, like you mentioned, that Herbig's going to probably be the guy that's going to be taking over the majority of those, breather snaps for either TJ Watt or Highsmith. I think that's going to be the first guy in there. Transitioning to the offensive side, one player that I think that has a chance to come back, depending on how the draft falls down, and I think it's going to be after the draft, and it's going to be Mason Cole. He's a center. He's formerly the center of the Steelers. Right now, the Steelers have Herbig, Spencer Anderson, and even brought up Dan Moore apparently. So, I think that I think I would prefer Mason Cole over Dan Moore at that point. Do you think that there's a chance that Mason Cole finds himself back on the Pittsburgh Steelers?
I think so. We talked about Allen, the former Rams center, is a free agent. Multi-year starter, could be a bridge guy. Cole already knows the franchise. He knows the culture. He knows most of the linemen right now. So he's a definite possibility because he should definitely be cheap. He's been out there a while. Nobody's really pushing, dialing him up, saying, "Hey, we want you." I think he's at his best. He's a fill-in serviceable guy, like we saw 2 years ago, and then last year with expanded playing time and people got used to him, especially within the division, he really struggled. So it would all depend on. There's a couple guys, maybe three, that I think are plug-and-play centers. If you don't get one of them, you definitely want to bring in Cole and give whoever you do pick up, if it's the second wave of guys, a little bit of time, maybe to mid-season, before you throw them in there. Especially if you're trying to make – I really don't want a NFL transition guy that is making a position switch. I don't want that. It just, get an experienced center. Whether it's 3 or 4 years college experience or NFL experience, but don't throw a guy in there and for him to try to learn to play center at the highest level of football in the world. It's very difficult and it doesn't work very often.
No, I agree. And for me, I think like we mentioned, I think there's a chance that he does come back. I think optics of it looks kind of bad. He's one of the first players that the Steelers dropped, and then one of the last players they picked back up. But
it was really salary,
right?
I mean, and if he comes back, it'll be much cheaper.
Yeah, exactly, 100%. And I don't think there's any bad blood there or anything. I don't think that. So I think that it could be a match, to come back, but I don't think he's going to be given the starting position by any means. He may not even start in the pole position. I think that, a guy like Herbig, if, the center of choice doesn't fall to the Steelers in the draft, or the draft don't fall the way they want it, would probably be the guy in the pole position for the starting center job, in my opinion. One last thing I wanted to get your opinion on. Michael Penix Jr. made a visit to the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's a guy, that are expected maybe second round latest quarterback position. The Steelers have picked up, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, Allen, brother of out there in the Bills.
No, he's not his brother, by the way.
Oh, he's not.
No,
I thought he was.
He's not Josh Allen's brother.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because we said that last week, and I told you I wasn't sure, and I did some research.
Yeah,
and he's not his brother.
Oh man, I must have got it from the same place we thought Najee Harris's middle name was Jerome. That website, we got to stay off that website. So we got that guy in Allen, who's not the brother of Josh Allen, obviously.
But he was his backup.
He was his backup. Where does Michael Penix fall, and why would and I don't think the Steelers are going to go and pick him up. I don't think a quarterback is in preview of the Steelers in the top 4 rounds. Where do you see this move being taking place, and why?
I think that if the Steelers are doing their due diligence, they really like him, the way he throws the ball. They like his deep ball accuracy. Because
Mm-hmm.
when you got George Pickens on the team, you want somebody who can throw deep. And we know Wilson can. We know Fields has got the big arm. I think that third or fourth guy, they're thinking, well, what if people pass on Penix and then he falls to the Steelers in the late third? They would maybe say we ought to pull the trigger.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they have any plans on taking a quarterback early, but
Mm-hmm.
if they did, Penix is the guy they would target if
Mm-hmm.
he fell. Now there's some guys that's going to be later in the draft. Jordan Travis from Florida State, Sam Hartman from Notre Dame, formerly of Wake Forest. Those are guys that might even go undrafted, or 6th, 7th round, or undrafted, and that's guys I'd like to see because they want 4 quarterbacks at camp,
Mm-hmm.
and I think those guys are under the radar guys that are winners that understand the game. They have touch on their passes. They understand anticipation, throwing guys open. That is something that a lot of guys with big arms are not really good at. And if you could get a guy like that as a developmental guy who might could be your full-time quarterback too
Mm-hmm.
down the road, I think, especially if you get him as an undrafted guy, that could be a steal. So, but yeah, I think they're just doing their due diligence on Penix in case he was to fall, or he was just too good of an offer to pass up.
Yeah. I think if there's any quarterback in the draft that's going to fall a bit, I think it's going to be Michael Penix. It has nothing to do with his play on the field and everything to do with the 4 season-ending injuries that he's had. I think that's scary. You're going into a league where the players are faster, bigger, and stronger, and the likelihood of an injury is probably more increased. And if you have a history of it, I think that's going to be a little bit of a red flag for some teams. So I can actually see Michael Penix dropping down to the 3rd round, or maybe even to the 4th, just because of that. Obviously, kind of depends on certain things, but if he ends up being picked up with that 2nd, 3rd round, I think that'd be fantastic value. I don't know if he's ever going to be competing for a starting position, but developmentally he could be.
Well, the talent's there, the arm's there, and he run a 4.40, I think, or 4.5.
Yeah.
And he's pro, so he's got speed. He's very athletic. Durability is obviously the big concern. But as you say, last year in the NFL, more quarterbacks were used. Many teams used 4.
Mm-hmm.
That I can remember. There was just so many injuries, even with all the new rules and protections for quarterbacks. But I think they're trying to make quarterbacks more mobile. And when you start that mobility factor in there, guys get hurt. Some of the offensive lines were atrocious. Steelers know about that. Guys get hurt. So, as you say, it might scare people. His lack of durability might scare people off. And the Steelers might say, hey, we're going to take a chance on him.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that might be the case there. If the Steelers end up going and selecting him, it's definitely because he fell and not because of his play. Because I think he, the way he throws the ball, he throws a pretty ball.
Oh, man, yeah.
His accuracy is there. Everything that you want out of a quarterback he has. You just got to see if he can do it in the pro level. And we'll see. We'll see if the Steelers end up selecting him if he falls to the later rounds. But with that being said, do you have any final words or anything else you want to say before we call it a show?
No, I seen one question here that 4TL Music Group was asking about any chance they bring back Quan Alexander. Well, we kind of already talked about Eric Rowe.
Yeah.
But Quan Alexander played excellent for the Steelers last year. When he was healthy and Cole Holcomb was healthy, they were starting. That was the best starting inside linebackers since Shazier and Vince Williams. But again, both guys, what has always been their weakness? was durability. And first, Holcomb gets taken out by friendly fire, and then Alexander tears his other Achilles after tearing the left one the year before. So I think Alexander, it's going to be a while. He would be a guy that if Steelers bring him back, it would be early in the season, and they still want to upgrade that inside linebacker position, and he looks like he's fully recovered, then they might bring him back. But I don't think we'll see him get signed to at least training camp by anybody.
Oh, I agree. I mean, those Achilles injuries. I mean, just having one can end a career. Having two on each leg, one on each leg, that's rough. We'll see. I mean, best wishes to him, and all the hope in the world for that he can recover and make it back to the league there. His age too is going to be a factor there. He's not overly up there, but he's getting close to 30, and so, or maybe perhaps he's already past that.
I think he's 31 now. I think.
Yeah. So he's on the wrong side of 30 if that's the case, and so
at a position that requires explosive, quick twitch. That's the thing, and that's what the Achilles it affects more than anything.
Yeah.
And so that if you're an offensive lineman, maybe. If you're, but defensive line, but when you're a linebacker and you got to attack and come forward and change directions, that's tough. That's tough.
Yeah, that definitely is. So, well, our best wishes to Quan, and hopefully he does make a full recovery and comes back. But we'll see. But with that being said, guys, I appreciate everybody tuning in. Make sure you check out SteelCurtainNetwork.com, your one-stop shop for Pittsburgh Steelers news and coverage. That being said, Shannon, take us out.